Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to this first webinar organized by the Harmonized Approach to Early Feasibility Studies for Medical Devices in the European Union project. It's my pleasure to welcome you. I am Giuditta Callea from Bocconi University in Milan, and I am the principal investigator of the HEU-EFS project. If you could please go to next slide. Thank you. So today, the webinar has three main goals. First of all, we would like to share with you the main results and recommendations that were developed during the first 2 years of activity of our project. We will also guide you into a proposed new methodological framework and present you some templates, checklists, and tools, including a proposed way to have patient involvement into EFS. And last, we will launch a call for pilots aimed to test the methodological framework that we propose and collect feedback to further improve the framework before finalizing it. Today, the webinar will be co-moderated by Tom Melvin from the University of Galway and Andrea Rappagliosi from Edwards Life Science, and I'm happy to leave the floor to Tom Melvin.
Thank you, Giuditta, and hello, everyone. Delighted to be with you. So Tom Melvin is my name. I'm from the University of Galway. You're very welcome to today's webinar. Giuditta has outlined the purpose for today's discussion, so we'll be presenting to you the work already done, the methods and frames we've developed, and a call for pilots as well. I'll hand over to Andrea Rappagliosi, who also has some introductory remarks.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Giuditta. Thanks to all that are joining. It's a great pleasure to see this little number up on the screen, going up, going up, going up. I think it's an important moment. I don't want to enter in any formality or welcoming, but just a couple of words. And Tom, Giuditta, I think you will lead the discussion. But when we started almost 2 years ago, was really pioneering a space. And also, if I can use, it's not only pioneering a space, but entering also in a kind of an uncharted territories, because doing major changes in attracting investment in early R&D, in early research in Europe, without touching legislation, without modifying legislation, is kind of mission impossible. I remember the first conversation, how you do that, how this can even happen. And today, I mean, we are launching the amongst other things, but we are launching the pilots. So actually we are entering in the phase of testing, trialing, the work that has been done, the great work that has been done by all of you, lots of people that is working, really find a way of optimizing this pathway. If I may say, without any rhetoric, it's not only a great day for research for Europe, but it's also a great day for patients, because all what we are trying to do is really to get early research. Early research on breakthrough innovation means that patients in Europe are not anymore, or could be not be anymore, second-class patient compared to other geographical areas of the world. So with this word, maybe I took too long, but I really wanted that we enter in this phase with this positive. It's been tough, but we are really cracking the code early next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. So our webinar is recorded and it will be made available online on our project website. We are collecting questions and they can be submitted in written form, slightly through Slido. So if you scan the QR code that you see here showed, you can type questions and you will be asked in a while to provide your feedback. We will have probably the time to answer just a limited number of questions, but we will answer in written all your questions and make available the answers on our website. So you will find the link in a message that you will receive shortly after the webinar today. So please, if you could go to next slide. My role is now to guide you and give you a flavor of our project and the rationale and the strategic relevance for having the possibility of having a harmonized framework for EFS, early feasibility studies for medical devices in the European Union. But before we delve in the contents, I would like, and next please, I would like to show you a first question to break the ice, and I would like to ask you, what do you see as the biggest challenge for conducting early feasibility studies in the European Union? So please scan the QR code and provide your feelings regarding the biggest challenges for conducting these early phase pre-market clinical investigations. Okay, so thank you for this initial feedback. It seems that regulation and regulatory framework, the lack of a harmonized framework for the conduction of these studies in the European Union and European Economic Area, lack of harmonization, high uncertainty and costs for the conduction of these clinical investigations seem to be perceived as the biggest challenges. We will have time to further comment your perspectives later on, but I kindly ask to go ahead with the slides. What are early feasibility studies? First of all, many of you may be familiar with such studies. EFS are limited clinical investigations of a device early in the development, typically before the technology has a final design, and they are conducted when additional non-clinical tests are either not available or non-informative. They are conducted to evaluate a device with respect to initial clinical safety and performance or effectiveness in a small number of subjects. Information obtained from an EFS can guide device modifications. Next, please. In the United States, after recognition that there was an ongoing drop in the number of clinical investigations conducted in the US, the Food and Drug Administration underwent a number of changes, revised the practices for the conduction of pre-market clinical investigations. And one of these strategies was the launch of an early feasibility studies program in 2013. Okay, but the US do not follow our regulation in the European Union. So are EFS feasible in the European Union? Next, please. And the answer is yes. EFS are feasible in the European Union. They are recognized among the pre-market clinical investigations that can be conducted in the pilot stage, both by ISO 14155, that deals with clinical investigations of medical devices for human subjects, and the same by the Medical Device Coordination Group Guidance 2021-6. In addition, early feasibility studies are consistent with the life cycle approach for clinical evidence generation envisaged by both the Medical Device Regulation and the Health Technology Assessment Regulation. Next, please. Early feasibility studies are not only feasible and possible, but are beneficial basically to all the possible stakeholders. They are beneficial to patients because patients have the possibility to access early to new and safe technologies that in many cases can be life-saving. They are beneficial to payers and policymakers because they gain an early knowledge of the technologies, and they can understand whether these new technologies align with their needs and the patient needs, and it's worth funding those technologies. But they are beneficial, of course, to the developers of the technologies because companies develop innovations that must meet patients and healthcare professional needs. And last, healthcare professionals deepen their clinical development excellence. Next, please. So we know that EFS are feasible. We know they are beneficial, but currently we are lacking in the European Union a harmonized framework within the existing regulation, but we are lacking some harmonized practices for submission, for assessment of these studies. So somehow there is no a common reference throughout the European Union. And finally, this means that the European Union is losing competitiveness and attractiveness for innovation, while we do believe that it's worth putting in place some strategies to attract and to stimulate the companies, especially the SMEs, who could probably not afford the possibility of undertaking an EFS, a costly EFS in the United States. For these reasons, the European Commission decided to invest and launched a public call, an Horizon Europe call, which is an innovative health initiative joint undertaking. So it's a public-private partnership. Next, please. And this is us. This is the HEU-EFS project. It's a consortium made of 22 public and private partners. You see some academic partners, healthcare providers, health technology assessment bodies, patient organizations, CRO, a number of SMEs, and a number of large health technology developers. We are located in 13 countries, 9 within the European Union, 1 in the European Economic Area, that is Norway, and 3 non-European countries that are the US, UK, and Switzerland. In our ecosystem, we also have members within an advisory board. We have competent authorities, notified bodies, national ethics committees, medical societies, networks, independent experts, and the trade association. And we can count on the advice of 10 members of a patient advisory group. What is our joint and common aim? To formulate recommendations for establishing an EFS program within the European Union, focusing on ensuring patient safety and enhancing the European Union single market competitiveness. If you could go to next slide, please. This is us. Here you can see the full list of all the 22 members of our consortium. And today you will see just several representatives of this large consortium presenting the next parts of the contents to be presented today. Could you please go to next slide, please? Okay, so our activities have been organized in 3 different and subsequent stages. The first was the conduction of research and analysis to get a full understanding of the characteristics and the challenges of the conduction of pre-market clinical research in the European Union, with a special focus on early feasibility studies. And in this phase, we conducted a literature review. We reviewed the EFS program in the US. We collected some quantitative data on early feasibility studies. We analyzed international standards, EU regulation, medical device coordination group guidance. The consortium, the full consortium, was involved in these activities and also in some surveys and interviews and focus groups. And altogether, we also mapped out the pre-market approval pathways and some ethical approval processes. This, the latter, were in common with the second step of the project, that is the development of a framework that also required us some mapping out of existing regulatory pathways in the European Union. The last part relates to testing the proposed framework to a number of pilot use cases. We have been working within the consortium and with the members of the advisory board and the patient advisory group, but we did not limit ourselves to this to the HEU-EFS ecosystem, but we have been in touch and consulting also with the GSANTE and the clinical investigation and evaluation working group. Next, please. While I thank you for your attention in this initial part of the webinar, I encourage you to share your questions via Slido. And in the meantime, I'm happy to leave the floor to my colleagues who will now present you in detail the results of the first 2 years of the project. And it will be my colleague Federico Facciolo from Bocconi University. And then we will leave the floor to Marta Kerstan from Johnson & Johnson Medical and Nicola Martelli, APHP, who will guide us into the recommendations.
Thank you, Giuditta, for the introduction. We're going to be talking about the results from our methodological approaches to really gain a better understanding of the current state of EFS in Europe. So let's start with the key features of EFS. Our scoping review of the literature revealed the key elements that are needed to develop an HEU-EFS program. First is to have early and continuous dialogue between sponsor and regulators. So basically, dialogue helps sponsors to gain a better understanding of the requirements for regulators, and also allows regulators to get a better understanding of the device technology and the evidence that supports the clinical investigation of sponsors. The second element is to have processes for iterative changes for both device design or study design during EFS. As it was mentioned before, EFS are clinical investigations that are conducted before a device design is finalized. So it's important to have processes in place to navigate those changes. The third element is related to patient enrollment numbers. So our literature reviews identify that EFS do typically involve a limited number of patients, which is usually less than 15 patients, but that's a flexible number and may change. And we also identify that EFS may allow stage enrollment, so the opportunity for sponsors to adapt their enrollment numbers based on the results of their investigations. Patients should also be engaged in the clinical investigation and in the process, so they should be allowed to inform the elements of the EFS design. Another key element for an HEU-EFS program is to have clinical sites that have experience in conducting early clinical investigations. Why is that? Basically, those kind of clinical sites, they may have access to a specific patient populations that other clinical sites may not have access to, and they may also have experience navigating ethical, legal, and contracting issues of conducting early clinical investigations. And finally, an HEU-EFS program should also support EFS that basically have a positive balance between risk and benefit. Next slide, please. So we talk about feasibility of EFS in Europe, and while they are feasible, the process of conducting EFS is not facilitated. So basically, EFS as clinical investigations, they do fall under the medical device regulation, and ISO standards also have a taxonomy for EFS definition. However, European regulation usually broadly applies to clinical investigation in general, and they do not describe specific elements that address specific EFS needs. Another element is MDCG guidance, which may allow some flexibility to conduct EFS, but eventually the lack of limited provisions for EFS makes it difficult to conduct this kind of study in Europe. This evidence was also supported by our interviews with national competent authorities who reported that they feel like there is a lack of formal EFS definition in the European regulation and a lack of homogeneous assessments across member states. Next slide. So we talk about feasibility and the fact that conducting an EFS is not facilitated, but our analysis of clinical investigations revealed that EFS are actually being implemented in Europe and globally. So our analysis of clinical investigations between 2013 and 2023 revealed a total of 559 studies that could be identified as EFS. As you can see from the top left corner graph, the number of EFS has been gradually increasing over the past years. And for example, in Europe, we're going from an average of 5 EFS per year in 2013 to 18 EFS per year in 2023. EFS, they do address different patient conditions. 46% of them address disease of circulatory system, 15 relates to nutrition and metabolic diseases, and 11 address disease of the nervous system. Let's talk about the implementation of EFS in Europe. We identified a total of 28% of EFS conducted globally are actually conducted in Europe. 24% are conducted in Europe only, and 4% are kind of multi-country studies conducted both in Europe and other extra-European jurisdictions. But what are the countries that conduct the most EFS? You can take a look at the top 10. We have Germany, United Kingdom, Belgium, and France that they have been conducted 20 or more EFS. Those countries are followed by Switzerland, Poland, and Netherlands, who have been conducting 11 or more EFS. And finally, we have Italy, Spain, and Sweden that have been conducted 9 and 8 EFS respectively. Next slide. So let's talk about attractiveness of Europe. We saw that EFS are being implemented but is Europe attractive for clinical investigations? We conducted a survey of 83 sponsors of clinical investigation in 2024, and this survey revealed that Europe is viewed as attractive. For example, 42% of sponsors indicated that Europe is their favorite location for conducting pilot clinical investigations. And another 16% of sponsors indicated that either Europe or the United States are their favorite location for conducting pilot clinical investigations. So basically, there are almost 60% of sponsors that positively view Europe as a favorite location for conducting clinical studies. Another element of attractiveness is demonstrated by the sponsor level of satisfaction with European national competent authorities and ethics committee response times during conducting a clinical investigation. Our survey revealed that 56% of sponsors are satisfied with approval of amendments submitted to national competent authorities. 54% are satisfied with approval of amendments submitted to ethics committee, and 50% are satisfied with responses to requests made to ethics committees for deviations and reports of deviations. So this is the evidence that suggests that Europe is attractive for conducting clinical investigation. Next slide. So we are attractive, but Europe is also usually being known for being rigorous in the amount of documentation required. We talk about that EFS do fall under MDR. So basically the MDR has an annex, which is called Annex 15, that describes documentations required to be submitted by sponsors along with their application for clinical investigations. And as you can see, since this is the MDR, Europe is consistent across all of these maps and graphs, and they do comply, European countries do comply with these requirements. However, what is also important is that the countries that do not require all of these documents and countries that have low bureaucracy, they are still be able to achieve a high quality clinical investigation. And this evidence comes from our sponsor. So this is also another important aspect to be considered when conducting clinical investigation. Next slide. So in addition, we also have to acknowledge the fragmented nature of ethics approval in Europe. Our analysis of a sample of ethics committee reviews in Europe revealed that there are two main models, a parallel and before model. So basically the parallel model, in the parallel model, the ethics committee review happens in parallel with national competent authorities assessments, while in the before model, the sponsor is required to obtain an ethics committee approval before submission of application to the national competent authorities. This fragmentation is also highlighted by the difference in the maximum days that ethics committee allow for their evaluation that ranges from 28 days in some countries to more than 100 in others. And this evidence of fragmentation is also confirmed by our interviews with national competent authorities, who reported that the diverse ethics approval models across Europe generally struggle and underscore the need for a harmonized model. For example, one NCA mentioned that they feel like there are different approaches, and this is the problem. And another NCA mentioned that a more harmonized approach would be helpful. Next slide. And finally, dialogue. Our research revealed that there is a lack of standardized dialogue between sponsors and national competent authorities. Our survey of 19 national competent authorities showed that only 63% of them offer a possibility of dialogue with sponsors through pre-submissions, innovation meetings, or scientific advices, while 32% do not. When it happens, dialogue may occur either before, during assessment, or after assessment. And in 100% of national competent authorities mentioned that their dialogue relates to administrative aspects of submissions, while only 33% of NCAs mentioned that discussion of preclinical testing or advice on study design usually is involved in the dialogue. Regardless of that, 82% of NCAs believe that dialogue improves quality of clinical investigation applications. And this was also confirmed by our interviews, where NCAs revealed that dialogue improves assessment efficiency and speed through NCA adaptability and sponsor cooperation. And the NCAs felt like the assessment was easier and the solution was quicker when there was a dialogue between them and the sponsors. Next slide. So essentially, what are the main challenges that we want to address? We talk about harmonization and the need for harmonization. And this is a big challenge that has to be addressed because it may lead to inconsistent interpretation of the regulation across member states and sponsors and other stakeholders. Another issue is related to evidence and evaluation quality. This lack of harmonization may lead to poor documentation submitted by sponsors to NCAs. And during our research, NCA reported that sometimes applications do miss data and have diverse templates that are used. Another element is related to stakeholders coordination. We talk about dialogue, we talk about the need to have more dialogue across stakeholders and the need for early alignment. And also there is a need to address this lack of structure, dialogue, and consultation process. Another challenge is related to capacity and expertise gap. Our analysis shows that there is a limited number of investigators with experience in conducting EFS in Europe, and this also suggests a need for more structured training for these investigators and clinical sites. We also hinted a little bit about financial and structural limitations, especially for small, medium enterprise companies who may have limited funding and limited resources to address and navigate complex assessment and application processes. And finally, ethical approval. We talk about complex frameworks that may cause delay. And so there is also a need to develop more clear ethical guidance for these processes. Next slide, and I'm handing over to our colleagues, Marta and Nicola, to present our recommendations.
Thank you so much, Federico. Having mapped the key challenges to develop an EFS program, as you just heard, we will now turn to the 7 recommendations, the concrete recommendations designed to address these issues and accelerate the implementation. So we will go clockwise. Let's start with harmonization. Today, early feasibility studies face fragmented national process, as you have heard, leading to inconsistent timelines and expectations. There is also a lack of specific guidance and templates tailored specifically to EFS. To address this, we recommend to developing an EU-wide guidance that clearly outlines phases, eligibility criteria, roles, and timelines. Standard templates such as the clinical investigation plan, informed consent form, investigator brochure, and master clinical trial agreement should be created along with the clear insurance requirements. Collaboration with national competent authorities is key to harmonized assessment criteria and timelines. Why does this matter? It ensures a predictable and transparent approval process, reduces sponsor burdens, especially in small medium enterprises, and builds trust in a unified HEU-EFS pathway. Next is dialogue. Currently, there is no structured EU-wide advice process. Sponsors face fragmented interactions with national competent authorities, expert panels, and HTA bodies, which leads to inconsistent feedback. We propose, therefore, establishing an EU-wide dialogue and engagement process that brings regulators, sponsors, clinicians, and patients together on a regular cadence. This should include clear standardized advice in 4 categories, covering pathway, protocol, pre-submissions, and continuous, along with harmonized templates, which will all reduce ambiguity and streamline the interactions. A formal iterative feedback loop for devices and protocol changes instituted with clear timelines and traceability to track decisions over time. This harmonization will improve not just the study design, but also reduce delays and clock stops and foster stronger trust between sponsors and regulators. Awareness. Across Europe, awareness and expertise are uneven, as you have heard. Some competent authorities lack the necessary experience, and many small-medium enterprises often struggle with fragmented guidance, making it hard to navigate. Patients are also underinformed and lack accessible training materials. Our recommendation is therefore a call for targeted training for all stakeholders, the competent authorities, small-medium enterprises, trial sites, the CRO, and patients, and the creation of a structured online portal offering guidance, templates, and best practices. Sustainability can be achieved by linking to existing EU repositories like the CSABC, which is a EU open source platform which enables secure and collaborative information sharing. Together, these steps will build capacity to foster consistency, again, help small, medium enterprises navigate EFS more effectively, engage patients to participate more meaningfully in the study design. The next recommendation is transparency, another key area. Currently, there is no public registry or EU-wide database for EFS, and performance monitoring is limited, with existing repositories underused and inconsistently applied. We suggest applying therefore the FAIR principles, making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and developing an HEU-EFS database to track submissions, approvals, and modification. Additionally, a performance dashboard could monitor timelines, outcomes, and transitions to pivotal studies. Collectively, these measures would increase trust, accountability, promote knowledge sharing, and provide valuable data to refine future processes. So I would like now to hand over to Nicola, who will share the next recommendations with you.
Thank you, Marta. So the fifth recommendation relates to stakeholder involvement. So stakeholder involvement is currently limited, especially in early development of MDs. Patients, expert panels, and HTA bodies are often left out, and there's no structured engagement framework in place. So we recommend establishing structured engagement pathways, developing best practice guidelines for stakeholder involvement, and creating patient-friendly consent materials with the participation of national competent authorities in these initiatives. But we'll also recommend using tools like prompts and prompts data to inform regulatory decisions. So this way, we would like to promote and facilitate knowledge sharing, and we think that it will ensure capacity building among all stakeholders. So the next recommendation is about incentives for R&D. So R&D in the EU faces substantial regulatory and clinical evidence costs that are particularly burdensome for SMEs. So this often leads to delays and or abandonment of EFS due to lack of support. So we propose to exploring regulatory and financial support options, reviewing economic and fiscal model to foster R&D, and providing clear guidance on types of coverage already available. So additionally, we would like also to develop a structured coverage application process for sponsors, and this will reduce barriers for innovators, maintain R&D activity in Europe, and accelerate access to safe and innovative technologies. So last but not least, the final recommendation is about digital health technologies. EFS are underutilized in this area, so we sponsor often avoiding it due to regulatory uncertainty. AI-enabled medical devices face these dual requirements under MDR and the AI Act, and this can create confusion. So we recommend defining a clear EFS pathway tailored to the specificities of DHT, along with updated templates and protocols for software and AI-enabled medical devices. Another important step would be clarifying the interplay between the MDR and the AI Act, and together these steps will reduce uncertainty, encourage early participation, and support the safe and responsible introduction of AI-driven health technologies. So now, Tom, over to you for the Slido session. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. So you'll see here, this is a multiple choice Slido, and then we have an opportunity to raise some questions in the Slido. So if you use the QR code, you'll be able to go in and select your preferences for this first question. What we're looking at is the priorities for the recommendations to improve early feasibilities in Europe. So you can select the priorities from your own perspective. Very good. I see the answers are populating. We still have a number of people inputting, so we'll maybe just give another moment and then we can have a look at the results. Excellent. I think we're reasonably stable with the results. So thank you everyone for completing. Just to run through them. So the most commonly selected answer was developing harmonized standards for early feasibility. A standardized regulatory dialogue was also popular, and the third most popular answer was structured stakeholder engagement pathways. So thank you very much. I think people have probably finished. There's one or two, so we'll collect those afterwards. We have time for one more question part now. So from everyone in the audience, you're free to raise a question. And we can see on the screen here the different questions that have been submitted so far. So we'll maybe take one question in the interest of time now, but there'll be a couple more spots later in the webinar. We'll be able to raise questions again. And just to let people know, for any questions we don't get to today in the open webinar, we'll follow up to provide responses with the material that we publish after the webinar. So looking at the first question here, so some countries provide consolidated ethics and competent authority submission and approvals for early feasibility studies. Perhaps I could start and we could hand over to Federico, who was presenting some of the data from his analysis. From what we've learned in the project, as we've seen across Europe, you can either apply sequentially, where you apply first to the ethics and then to the competent authority. And in some member states, you can apply in parallel. So you can apply to both the competent authority and ethics at the same time. And that can be a useful way when time is precious to complete the procedures together. So I guess hopefully you saw from the presentation earlier some of the data. I might hand over to Federico in case he has any other comments he'd like to share.
Maybe what I can ask Tom is that as shown, national competent authorities receive applications for early feasibility studies. What we are lacking, so they know what early feasibility studies are. What they do is but they receive these applications as traditional pre-market clinical investigations. So they do not have any consolidated submissions and approvals, privileged pathways, I would say. So basically, an EFS is evaluated as a standard pre-market clinical investigation with a standard ethics approval, standard criteria that probably are designed for traditional feasibility studies rather than for early feasibility studies.
Thank you, Judita. So I guess we could move to the next session now, where Sasha and Yasmin are going to present the methodology and some of the activity ongoing in the project. So I'll hand over Sasha and Yasmin.
Thank you, Tom. So Yasmin and I are going to take you into phase 2 of the project, where we're looking at developing the methodology, proposing a process for HEU-EFS studies, tailored templates and checklists, and the metrics that we will have to understand how this is working. So I represent the Norwegian Institute of Public Health, and I can have the next slide, please. So as Judita has told us already, a lot of work has been done in phase 1, collecting research and analysis to understand the current state of play. And so in phase 2, we've looked at eligibility criteria for where EFS is most relevant. We've looked at templates and checklists, how we can harmonize this for early feasibility studies. And then we're proposing this pathways for the pilots initially, and then hopefully further for general use. And we are collecting data on this to understand how this is working. And during the pilots, we will also be improving the process. And we've drawn on synergies from the expert panel's scientific advice, the health technology assessment regulation and for joint scientific consultation, the coordinated assessment, and the draft MDCG breakthrough guidance and other pathways. Next slide, please. So focusing on the eligibility criteria for the pilots, from a technology perspective, we've been focusing on high-risk devices, class 3 and 2B, implantable devices, where a clinical investigation would be necessary for the conformity assessment, so for the CE marking. And here we're focused on breakthrough devices, devices that meet unmet needs for patients, devices where there is a need to further the understanding of anatomy, and new and expanded uses of devices where they've been used in a different area previously. And so if you see from the pyramid on the right-hand side, you see we're focusing on the two upper sections here. Next slide, please. And so in order to move into an early feasibility study, a certain amount of preclinical evidence has to be collected. And our goal is to be in as much compliance with the general safety and performance requirements as possible. But of course, preclinical testing will not be finalized, as this is very early on in the development of a medical device. And often, as has been explained, early feasibilities are to understand and finalize the design of a device. So the design is in an iterative phase. And so the goal is to have the preclinical testing done as far as possible, and justifications for not having completed preclinical testing should be justified. For example, that the goal of the early feasibility study is to show this, where anatomy and physiology cannot be tested until going to the clinic. Also looking at concurrent testing, for example, cycles for mechanical testing, that some of it can be done in parallel. And also leveraging data, again, because this is so early on in the development of a device. For example, sterility and packaging, you would expect that if you can leverage data from other devices that are similar, that would be very useful at this stage. And the goal here is, especially for startups, to promote innovation in Europe so that we can develop EFS guidance to help SMEs move from bench to bedside. Next slide, please. So for the clinical sites and clinical expertise needed for an early feasibility study, of course, they need to be compliant as far as possible with the MDR. There needs to be an increase in regulatory competence, as we heard earlier, for all parties. And there's a need for ongoing dialogue between the sponsors, the personnel involved, and the competent authorities. And the personnel involved, of course, have to be qualified under good clinical practice and also meet the additional requirements nationally. And the site has to have the capacity and equipment needed for emergency care and to support the study properly. And the clinical staff should have expertise in the area, in the therapeutic area. And of course, working together with the patient advisory group, independence and transparency was lifted as an area that was needed. And of course, where independence can't be ensured, then transparency should be shown clearly. And again, from the patient advisory group, dedicated units and personnel specifically tasked with coordinating the regulatory aspects, but also the patient aspects, so that all these are kept as needed from all aspects. And again, the regulatory submission and contracts. So next slide, please. And so looking at the current situation with MDR, pre-market clinical investigations fall under Article 70. And so the upper line here shows invasive 2A, 2B, and class 3 devices, and the lower line shows class 1, non-invasive 2A and 2B devices. And you see here the major difference is the evaluation of 45 days for the invasive devices. And this is where, with the mapping that was done early on, there was a great variation. So the longest time point or timeline here is 120 days, but when we were mapping, we found that this could be much, much higher. And this is where it's clear that there's a need for harmonization. So next slide, please. So this is where we've developed the process, and this is the areas that we have focused on. So enhancing early dialogue options is something that has been identified very clearly. We wish to accelerate the EFS process, and I'll go into detail on this in the next slides, reducing the review times. And this is not only from the competent authority perspective, but the sponsor perspective. And by the idea of acceleration is by having streamlined templates, checklists, and monitoring this with performance metrics. And then also, if it's possible, to have a parallel competent authority ethics committee review. And this will lead to more timely, more efficient, and better collaboration. So next slide, please. So here we go into the details of the process that we're proposing. So in the pre-submission phase, we're opening up for a contact point. And I'll talk more in detail, but here it is to allow planning and resource allocation from the competent authority perspective. And where there's multi-stakeholders, of course, the sponsor NCA, and where appropriate ethics committees, the experts from the NCA, principal investigators for the sites, and the option to invite other member states if the study is going to be conducted in multiple member states. So this is one of the areas we see is very important, to have this early contact point and early dialogue. And then with the submission, that there's a validation phase, a request for information if the submission is not adequate, and that there's a accelerated cycle time between the sponsor and the NCA. And again, that the NCA can utilize stop clock approach, or also encouraging rolling reviews so that they communicate their findings along the way. And all of this, we believe, can lead to a reduction in 30% for the timelines that we currently have under MDR. So going into a bit more detail on the next slide, please. Thank you. So the contact point. So this is basically to alert the NCA that there will be an incoming file. It identifies the key principles of the device technology and outlines the qualifications for an accelerated review. And the idea of this is that an email is sent, and within 1 to 2 weeks, the competent authority says they have received it, they're aware of this, and that the EFS study has been registered. The next stage then is the early dialogue, which of course is optional, but we would always encourage early dialogue, where the opportunity is to have targeted discussions related to the device, the patient population, and details of the study that the sponsor would like help with. And this is in the pre-submission phase, and would then be that the sponsor contacts, and within 60 days, the competent authority responds and allows for a meeting. Next slide, please. So this is just to show you the next stage of the submission and validation. So we're on the left side, we're comparing to the current MDR situation, where you have the timing of 10 to 55 days, and the proposed accelerated EFS, where you can see we're not shortening substantially, 7 to 39 days. But the detail here is in the time for competent authority assessment, rather than 10 to 15, we're saying 7 to 12. But then we're also reducing the time if there's identified gaps for the sponsor to reply. The idea here is that the sponsor should be very ready to pursue this pathway in order to achieve it. And the final NCA decision, again, we keep this the same. So this gives a saving of 12% for the competent authorities, but we're looking at the sponsors to save between 30 and 60%. Next slide, please. And so for the review, So the submission to the review under MDR at the moment, it's 45 to 65 days, but the accelerated process, we would aim for 30 to 45 days, where the NCA assessment is then reduced again to the lower limit of the MDR. But here we expect that rolling review and interactive question approach would be used, that there's a stop clock if there's a need, a request for information, that the NCA stops the clock and only starts it again once the sponsor has responded to the gaps that have been identified. But again, as I said, the sponsor needs to reply rapidly and be prepared to reply. And then the final decision is with the competent authority, whether to utilize the time up to 45 days if they saved it or whether they push it through. Next slide, please. And so here is one of the ways in which we believe we can save the time. We've developed a template for the clinical investigation plan based on the MDCG guidance, but tailored to EFS. And especially here, we have a checklist to aid the sponsors internally with their clinical investigation plan so that they know that it's completed appropriately and they're ready for submission. For the informed consent form, templates have been developed, and especially from the perspective of small to medium enterprises, which maybe lack these type of internal document resources, and checklists for this as well, so that you can verify the patient requirements are met, and for the application to the competent authority and the ethics committee, that the submission is compliant with the relevant regulations. And then for the master clinical trial agreement, again, that a checklist has been developed so that it's easier to understand that the correct elements are being included. And again, for the insurance agreement, that the guidance is practical, so that the non-negotiable parts of the insurance agreement are clearly shown, and it serves as a reference for the minimum essential requirements. Next slide, please. And then in order for the project to understand how this process is going with our pilots, we have come up with performance indicators. And this we've split into 4 stages, which the sponsors involved in the pilots will submit to us, and thereby we can collect the number of EFS submitted per year per country, whether they're small to medium enterprises, which competent authorities are doing the assessments, and whether patients have been involved or patient associations during the study design. And then after the EFS application has been submitted, what type of dialogue was used, whether clinical sites were involved, if it was a single or multi-center early feasibility study, the risk class, health conditions, and proms and prims. And then after the application has been validated, how many were approved, whether they were SMEs, the time to approval, how many were rejected, list of ethics committees involved, and the time from ethics committee approval or submission to approval. And finally, after the submission, the time from the clinical site signature to first patient enrollment, number of patients involved in the EFS, the number of EFS that transitioned to pivotal clinical investigations, number terminated, withdrawn, or suspended, and additional pre-market clinical investigations that were done if the EFS was terminated, withdrawn, or suspended. And then I think I hand over to Yasmin for the patient perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha, and hello and welcome also from my side. I'm Yasemin Teisel, and I work at the European Patients Forum. We're an umbrella patients organization, and today I'm here to tell you a little bit about the importance of meaningful patient involvement for successful EFS in Europe in the future. Next slide, please. So the first questions I want to answer are why and how to co-create with patients. And the why is really actually a very simple answer. Patients can help produce better medical devices that actually meet their needs, because they have the unique understanding of what it's like to live with that device, and they can help understand the gaps and the benefits of devices and make them better through different processes. And ultimately, the goal is then, of course, that these devices perform better on the market. Patients can also help understand what are the benefits most important to them, as well as the risks that they are willing to take or not willing to take when talking about a device or a clinical study such as an EFS. And from a wider perspective, patient involvement supports meaningful innovation by enhancing legitimacy, transparency, and accountability. It also leads to better and more relevant studies and results. And finally, also challenges researchers' assumptions because they bring their unique perspective to the table and have views that perhaps others might overlook. In the second part of the slide, you can see a sort of timeline of possible engagement opportunities with patients from pre-market to post-market. And the general rule is the earlier patients are involved in the process, the greater the impact and benefit of this involvement. And this also applies throughout the device life cycle, so from beginning to end. And here you can see, for instance, it can start with setting research priorities and objectives, helping co-design materials, especially documents that are patient-facing, but also participating in ethics reviews, as well as study reporting and communication after the study has been completed. And this requires engagement with all actors. Patients cannot do this on their own. And this leads me to the next point. So on the next slide, you can see that this really inspired our patient engagement strategy in the HEU-EFS project. The key word here is multi-stakeholder collaboration. And to achieve that, we set up 3 pillars in our plan. And the first pillar is the umbrella patient organizations, which is EPF, and we're collaborating very closely with Global Heart Hub. Together, we're managing the patient engagement process in the project, and we're also contributing high-level collective patient perspectives. Then at the center of the patient engagement strategy is the patient advisory group, the so-called PAG, which is a group of 10 patients who bring their lived experiences across the project. And then finally, to support the whole process, we have the patient engagement ambassadors, which are specific nominated consortium partners in this project who have the technical expertise, but also the overview of the work that is going on to help really pinpoint moments of engagement, such as consultations, surveys, workshops, etc. And this is always guided and framed by so-called patient engagement plans. And these are very practical documents to tell us what to do, how to do it, and when. Next slide, please. So looking at the findings from the consultations with the PAG, the Patient Advisory Group, here are some key results and key points that we want to highlight. You can also find them in some of the reports that you can find on our websites that are currently on the website or will be uploaded soon. And in terms of EFS methodology and patient engagement, as you can imagine, the clear recommendation is here to involve patients and patient organizations in the study design, conduct, and outcomes, so throughout the process, and to combine patient experience data together with clinician-reported data for better outcomes. In terms of more practical aspects, it's of course important to support patients in the process of participating in an EFS. So having a support group where peer-to-peer exchange or exchange with researchers can occur would be important, as well as clear information sharing to build trust and reduce uncertainty in the process. And that leads me to the next point, which is patient information and informed consent. Please, the previous slide still, thank you. Which is patient information and informed consent. So informed consent is a key aspect of the whole process, and it is important to understand that it is an ongoing process, not a one-time task that can be ticked off and then it's done. A patient is given a form and they sign in that's it. That's not the case. It is a dialogue, a communication to help patients understand what they're signing up for, why, what are the risks and benefits, what are the devices that are being tested. So it's really important for them to also be able to ask questions. And also to achieve that, it's important to use clear, lay-friendly language, help understanding with visuals, as well as empathetic and emotionally intelligent communications. As you can imagine, a patient already has to deal with the burdens of their condition and perhaps the uncertainty of deciding whether they want or not to participate in a clinical study. So having that sort of trust building process is really important to help their understanding and willingness to engage. And of course, it's important to be transparent and clear in terms of what is going to happen, the study design, the device details, the evidence that is existing, but also will be generated, etc. And on a more EFS specific level, it is important that patients understand what exactly an EFS is compared to other clinical trials. So they're small scale studies, they're very early in the development process. So they may be the first patients to test this device, and it's for high risk devices. So that means also relatively more high risk, but also the benefits, for instance, being able to access the treatment when they may not have many other alternatives. So this is also important for them to consider in their individual risk benefit assessment when they decide, do I want to participate or not? Another aspect in this is, of course, the lay summary for the clinical investigation protocol, which was suggested as an additional way of supporting understanding. And finally, in terms of key performance indicators, it is, of course, important to track patient engagement. Did it happen? How was the engagement? How did it happen? And how consistent was it conducted throughout the process to better understand what was going on? And moving on to the next slide. This is our final objective of our patient engagement work in this project. It is the so-called roadmap for structured patient contribution to EFS. It is in the works, and the works just started, so you will have to wait a little bit until 2027 when we will be ready with it and publish it. But again, it is a multi-stakeholder collaboration within the project, so we're all working together with the patient advisory group as well, of course, to create this roadmap to give an understanding and recommendations on how patients can create better medical devices in larger terms. So looking at practices that could be implemented, also looking at practices that are, of course, suitable for EFS and the specific needs of an EFS, so trying to be feasible as well, but also looking at the bigger picture of patient engagement recommendations for medical device development at large. And of course, we will present all the work and the consultations that we have done in the project. And this may be of interest for you as well, because the target audience that we're at the moment thinking about is everybody who is interested in EFS, in the implementation, as well as the governance of EFS. So this is it from my side. Thank you very much. And I hand back to Judita.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yasmin. Thank you also, Sasha, for presenting our proposed framework. We have already started collecting some questions, and feel free to add some additional questions. Let's try to answer some of these. One popular question relates to acceleration and efficiency. So they seem to like an important way forward. Can this be done within the medical device regulation framework, or would that require an amendment? Sasha, I would like to convey the answer to you.
Thank you, Judita. I hope you can hear me properly. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, so the idea we had when we were proposing the framework was, of course, we weren't expecting that there would be changes coming to the MDR. So here we are working within the current framework of the MDR. And the proposal of efficiency improvements is a large onus is on the sponsor to reply quickly and be ready to reply if there are identified issues with their application. So this is where the major saving is, but also from the perspective of the NCA, that you have this contact point that you get in touch with your competent authority, say you have an early feasibility study, it's at high risk, and if they need clinical experts to be brought in, then you give them some timings around when you're thinking of submitting, so that all of this can be organized in advance, because this is something the competent authorities don't have today. So a lot of the efficiency that we're identifying is actually planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha. And I think that you already answered the part of the third question, that is, why are we confident that the review timelines for EFS can be shortened when national competent authorities often exceed timelines? So in the proposal that Alexandra Poulson showed, as you may see, there is a preliminary moment, an anticipated dialogue where you may anticipate and have a discussion, and you anticipate any issues and questions that may facilitate, that may help reducing inefficiencies at a later stage. While we do not envisage early feasibility studies to become a prerequisite for all the pivotal clinical investigations, absolutely, early feasibility studies are ideal, are targeted for selected in principle for high risk medical devices. So we do not envisage that this will become a standard and a prerequisite for following clinical investigations. But let me go to the last question. I think we still have a couple of minutes. So are the checklists and templates going to come on top of what national competent authorities already request? Maybe I can start answering this, and Sasha, if you want to complement. We are perfectly aware that competent authorities, and in some cases, hospitals, have their own templates, and this is why we decided to develop both some templates and checklists, just to make sure that in case an organization, competent authority, a hospital, an ethics committee want their template to be used, a checklist identifies the minimum requirements, the minimum set of information that has to be part of that template, just because an EFS is a special kind of pre-market clinical investigation, so it may have some special requirements. So this is to say that in some cases we have this double option of a template and the checklist. We heard from the competent authorities that in many cases they observe poor quality applications. So templates, so having some standardized templates or some checklists that suggest what has to be in those documents would be a tool able to facilitate and increase the quality. And by increasing the quality of the application, in the end, we will reduce inefficiencies. We will reduce the back and forth of comments and observations. So how to say, we hope that our work and our templates will become widely used by national competent authorities. Of course, we aim for a harmonized framework with harmonized templates, but checklists are there just in case to complement with existing documents. I think we still have a couple of minutes, so feel free to add additional questions. Are the checklists and templates also applicable for low-risk devices? So, we do believe that the templates and checklists that we developed can be used not only for EFS. EFS have some special features that are highlighted in the templates, but it's very easy to adapt the templates and to reuse our work so to make it applicable in a very efficient and probably cheap way also for lower risk devices. Unless I receive additional questions on my screen, I think we may have a longer conversation during our last Q&A section, where we will touch the pilot use cases, because I noticed that some questions have already started on that. So let's take advantage of these 3 minutes, and I'm happy to leave the floor now to Manon Gilkens from Medtronic and Fanny van der Loo from Edwards Life Science. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Judita, and Sasha and Yasmin for laying out so well and precisely the process elements that we are proposing as consortium, as well as the role of patient associations and patient involvement throughout the process. My name is Fanny van der Loo, and I represent Edwards Life Sciences today. And let's move to the next slide, please. Very happy and pleased to introduce to you the section on the third and critical part and pillar of our project. You will have heard from Federico and Judita, Nicola and Marta, all the lay foundations that we've made with the research and analysis, building on what are the current barriers and opportunities to improve the system for early feasibility studies, and then heard from Sasha the type of proposals that we are making as a consortium to bring more efficiency and timing elements to improve the uptake of early feasibility studies for the benefit of patients in Europe, most importantly. We are now entering a critical phase, which is the third phase of our project, where we will be starting to test and validate the proposals and recommendations that we are bringing forward as the consortium. So if we are moving to the next slide, please. Very happy to be announcing to you that we are launching, as we speak today, the formal call for pilots coming also from the wider public. The reason why we are so interested by the pilots is that our ultimate objective is not to just develop a methodological framework, but really to test and validate how valid the recommendations and the methodologies are that we are proposing, really with the objective of building a sustainable framework for the European Union that will really make a change, both for the sponsors, for the authorities, the European Union, and last but not lastly, the patients. And we need pilots to be able to recommend any adjustments that may be needed in the proposals and the methodological framework that we are proposing. We have already identified internally within our consortium a number of pilots that we will be following, but from our perspective, it is really important to also offer the opportunity for the wider public to participate in our project, not only to increase the number of pilot, but also to make sure that we are reaching different patient conditions that we may not have looked at from the internal side of the consortium, and of course to continue to raise awareness about the added value that our methodological framework may be providing to all the different stakeholders involved. Handing over to Manon now.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Manon. I'm representing Medtronic in this very interesting consortium. So thank you, Fanny, for introducing already that we are really launching the pilots now. And as you said, we are very enthusiastic that after these 2 years of work, we have the opportunity to really start looking into the functionality of our proposals. So also from a sponsor perspective, it's very important to also, know what is in it for me as a sponsor with my EFS when I participate in this pilot. So when you're a participant in the pilot, you'll have the opportunity to test the regulatory framework that we are proposing and also the templates that we've developed for the EFS submissions to the EU competent authorities. Participants will also benefit. They'll have a unique learning experience and they have the opportunity to engage with our consortium experts. And last but also not least, it's very important that there is the opportunity to contribute and really have provide the feedback that will shape the development of this interesting pathway in the European Union. So next slide, please. So I'm hoping that we are really interesting all the sponsors. It's of course also important to know that we have certain eligibility criteria that were also already formulated by Sasha, but still it's important to mention that the scope in ours is really on high-risk devices where a clinical investigation is required as part of the conformity assessment. So these can be breakthrough devices to obtain early clinical data, or a feasibility study needed to better understand safety and performance of the device when used in humans, or to investigate new or expanded use or indications. In addition to, of course, the general criteria, it's also needed to formulate some consortium criteria. So the other criteria are the submission of the EFS is also needed in a European country, and that the EFS is planned for submission to the authorities by November 2026. So, and with that, Judita will take over and she will inform you more on the details of the application of your pilot to the consortium.
Thank you, Manon. Thank you, Fanny. So here you can see the steps and the flow of the submission process. Any sponsor of a possible pilot EFS has the possibility to submit an expression of interest through filling out an online form, which is already online on our project website. The recipient of this online form will be a contact point that is managed by Bocconi University only. So basically, the Bocconi University team involved in this project, we will reach out to the proposers to organize an information online call to discuss some details regarding the proposed pilot, to check whether it fits with our eligibility criteria and the general criteria. Of course, a confidentiality agreement will be signed by us and will be provided so to ensure a full and complete confidentiality. After this information call, in case the contact point believes that you are fit for purpose, you will be asked to fill out a little bit longer online form with some additional details regarding the pilot, the proposed pilot. And this form will be assessed by a screening committee coordinated by Buconi. And in the end, we will, after this internal discussion and further checks, we will come out with a list of prioritized pilots. We will inform the sponsors about our final decision. Before the final step, that is the application, so the submission of the study to a national competent authority in the European Union or European Economic Area, we ask the sponsors to complete a training that will support the pilot proposers getting a full and a clear understanding of early feasibility studies. And by the way, we are at work to finalize these training materials. And these there will be some training materials dedicated not only to the sponsors, but to all the stakeholders involved in the pilot. So there will be some materials for the competent authorities, for the ethics committees, for possible CROs. So there will be a, how to say, an upskill, so new knowledge for all the organizations involved in the pilot. The point of contact is an email that you can see shown on the right hand side in the bottom, and all the information are available on our website. You will see the QR code in a while. If we could move to next slide, please. What is important are the timelines. Our project is a 4 years project. We have just completed the second year, and we are expected to deliver the final guidance and the final rules by September 2027. So we can consider pilots that are able to provide us with feedback, so to help us implementing the changes by a specific timeline and deadline. So right now we will consider submissions of interest submitted by the end of March. And the pilots should start, so the application should be sent to the national competent authorities no later than the end of November in 2026. We will ask to the sponsors of the pilot EFS to provide some feedback, to provide some data. As Sasha Poulson showed, we are aiming to collect a number of key performance indicators to monitor the performance of the studies and of the program. So we need to collect feedback in a structured way throughout the duration of the pilot. We are planning to identify a maximum number of 10 public pilots, in addition to the ones that will be originated by the private companies that are part of our consortium. Of course, as you may imagine, we will receive applications on a rolling basis, and we will evaluate these applications and handle them on a first come, first serve basis. What is important to underline is that, and this is a common rule for all the pilots coming from both the internal, so the members of the consortium, and from external organizations. Any company interested, wishing to undertake a pilot EFS, has to pay all the costs related to the pilot, which means that there will not be any public funding from IHI, from the European Commission, from the consortium granted to any of the pilot use cases. Go to next slide, please. Okay, so we have already identified a follow-up entirely dedicated to the organizations that may be SMEs, large companies, university spin-off, hospitals, CROs, whose clients may be interested. And please save the date. We have a second webinar dedicated to pilots. It's on our agendas on December the 5th from 3 to 4 p.m. And all the information on pilots and expression of interest is available on our website. And pilots at HEU-EFS.eu is the contact point. Next slide, please. Now I leave the floor to Tom for the collection of additional questions via Slido.
Thank you, Judita, Fanny, and Manon. So we have a little bit of time, so we can take a number of questions. So looking at the screen here, we have a very general question. What do you expect from an EU harmonized approach for early feasibility studies? Perhaps I could start, and maybe I'll turn to Judita after for additional feedback. But from my perspective, having a more harmonized approach to these early stage studies will benefit everyone involved in the system. So this will help the developers of medical technologies to have clearer and more... Oh, sorry, this is a feedback question. Oh, sorry. I thought it was a question to me. Sorry, it's a question for everyone. My apologies.
That was good.
I'll type it. I see a number of people are still typing, so we'll give another moment for people to finish. Very good. So I don't think there are any very large words here. So I guess these are all individual contributions, but there's a number of things people are referring to here. So what do we expect from a harmonized approach to early feasibility studies? So you can see here in the middle, more innovation in Europe, more timely access for patients, clarity and speed. And then we have a number of less commonly selected suggestions, courage, less administration, clarity on requirements and predictable timelines. So they're coming through as themes. Better guidance for startups, increasing safety for patients and for the centers, early engagement, cost efficiency. Very good. So I guess a number of different suggestions there. And I guess all centered around the largest words in the middle here, which you can see supporting a greater degree of innovation in Europe and more timely access for patients. Very good. I see from the time that we have a little bit more time available. If the Slido format could allow, we could go back to the questions and answers format for a couple of minutes, if that works. Excellent. Okay, I'm in the right place now. So, how many pilots do you expect? Maybe Judita, could I turn to you for that question?
Yes, difficult to say how many we do expect. We do expect a minimum number of pilots coming from companies that are in the consortium. We do believe that we will be able to manage 10 pilots coming from organizations that have not been involved in the development of the framework. This would be particularly helpful and interesting for us because somehow company sponsors that didn't have any sort of engagement are completely unbiased. So the pilots are a way for us to test whether what we are proposing works or doesn't work. Should we make any amendments? Are we too optimistic in proposing a more efficient pathway with shorter timelines? Is it feasible to have dialogue? All this has to be tested. So we will consider, just in case we will receive thousands of applications, we are happy to consider to raise the number of pilots that we will manage. And I would like to thank in advance all those who consider the pilots, because through your collaboration and through your feedback, we will ensure a final proposal that will reflect the views and comments of organizations that are not only part of the consortium, but external organizations that will anyhow benefit from the possibility of EFS in the European Union.
Thank you, Judita. I might go to the next question on the screen there. So will the consortium help with the submission to the national competent authorities? Maybe I could start, and Fanny then turn to you. In the project, it's foreseen that we will have some expert support and advice. I guess there can sometimes be a difference. Some sponsors may use clinical research organizations, and they would, do the preparation of drafting and submission documents. In this project, it probably won't be possible to take and draft documents on your behalf, but we will have expertise available to support. But maybe Fanny, I could turn to you for some additional comments.
Of course, thank you, Tom. And indeed, as we outlined and presented by Judita, there is going to be a point of contact that is going to be able to help your preparedness as a sponsor in terms of making sure that the technology that you may be proposing as a pilot proposer is matching with the eligibility criteria and the methodological framework proposals that we are going to be testing. However, the consortium is not going to be able to go into the actual content of the actual clinical evaluation or the EFS itself. So it's not going to be a support on the EFS study, but it will be support that you can count upon through the different interaction moments, as well as the trainings that will be made available to help you really understand what to expect from the pilot and what you may be testing in terms of process and checklists and templates. Of course, Judita, feel free to chime in here, but I see that I answered that question. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Fanny. So we could maybe go to the next question on the screen then. And thank you for the compliment, whoever submitted this. So are all national competent authorities informed of this work and the pilots? So I could maybe start, but Judita, perhaps we could turn to you after. So we've had some very good engagement. Sasha, who you've met earlier in the webinar, works at the Norwegian Institute for Public Health, which has both health technology assessment as well as regulatory competencies. We're also very lucky in that we have on our expert advisory board support from competent authorities, which has been very useful. And during the project, we have had a lot of engagement. We had a survey as well as a workshop and an interaction with authorities, which brought together 19 different countries from Europe to talk about some of the challenges from a competent authority perspective. And we'd have a number of interactions through the relevant working group here, which is what used to be called the CIE, Clinical Investigation and Evaluation, and now called CIPSI Working Group, which is where the member states come together to work on the MDCG guidance and documents. So we're very thankful to the authorities for volunteering their time for the various surveys and workshops, and there will be more engagements. Judita, is there anything further from your side to add?
Yes, thank you, Tom. So I would like to also mention that in addition to what you mentioned, which is part of a public deliverable, and in our next and final slide, you will see a QR code that will guide you to all the published and approved deliverables. But we are meeting national competent authorities one-to-one for a 90 minutes meeting where we discuss their experience with EFS, their visions for a future EFS program. We discuss their interest in being involved in the pilot phase. We have been attending a number of CIE, now SIPS meetings, and I'm happy to inform you that next week, we will have the opportunity of a slot where we will present the framework and templates that we presented today to you, to the whole group of the competent authorities. So yes, they are informed. A number of them has shown interest in revising the proposal and the templates, and interest in being involved in the pilots. So we are happy to tell you, to confirm that there is an interest, because the competent authorities have among their priority the attractiveness of the European Union. So it's on everybody's agenda that we want to promote innovation. And being competitive doesn't mean that we want to compete with other jurisdictions, but we want to be competitive and create a favorable environment. So to attract some funding, some R&D investments that may be lost in case we don't go for an EFS harmonized program. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Judita. So we could go to the next question on the screen then. So this asks, is there any geographical limitation for submitting interest for pilots? And Fanny, you could maybe help or correct me here. So the scope of call for the pilots, I think, is agnostic for where the country or the company is coming from, but it has to be a study that will be happening within the EU MDR framework. So that would include the 27 member states and then 4 other countries that are part of the framework through the free trade agreements or European Economic Area. So that's how I understand the geographic. Oh, thank you, Fanny.
Yes, for the purpose of the pilot, indeed, it needs to be taken place in the EU or EEA area. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we could go to the next question then. Could you please share the EFS templates and guidelines if they're yet available for the sponsor to reference while waiting for the work to be completed? Maybe Sasha, could I turn to you for this question?
Thank you, Tom. So for the templates and guidelines, at the moment, we will only be making them available to those participating in the pilots, because there's a bit of training behind it, and we want to know that the devices that are going for this accelerated timeline are appropriate for the EFS pathway. And so from that perspective, at this moment in time, while we're running the pilots, it will be limited. But of course, apply for a pilot and you will get access to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha. We could go to the next question. So what date or timeline will the final proposal or recommendations be due to be submitted? Again, I could maybe start and perhaps turn to you, Judita. We have prepared some preliminary recommendations, which we presented earlier in the webinar. If I understand, that is a deliverable report that should be available. I think the plan for the final recommendations will be that we'll take the learnings from the live use cases, the real cases, and aim to have these ready towards the end of the project. So the project runs until September of 2027. So the final recommendations will be based on the live use cases, but we do have the preliminary recommendations already completed. Judita, is there anything further for that one?
Yes, Tom. We will have a number of pilot use cases submitted, and we will collect feedback from all these pilots. Anyhow, in parallel with the conduction of these pilot use cases, we are also planning to keep on having an interaction with organizations that may not be involved in the pilots. We have a number of deliverables, and this is the validation phase. Validation may go through pilots, but we may have some discussions, focus groups, we may have additional surveys, we may receive comments to our public deliverables, and all this will be considered and will inform our final recommendations. So just in case you do not have a technology ready for a pilot, but you wish to contribute, providing us your thoughts, we will be happy to receive them, and we'll provide you with some indications on how to submit your comments.
Thank you, Judita. So I think we're down to the last question from the submitted questions. So when will the project end? So we've covered that already, September of 27. And in terms of launching the pilots, as Fanny and Manon were describing, so the call for people to express interest is open now as of today. We are aiming for pilot cases where you would be ready to submit by November of next year. And I guess the expression of interest is open until March of next year, if I remember correctly, Fanny. So I guess they're the key timelines. You can approach us now, and you're very welcome. The opportunity to engage is until March, with an expected submission timeline by November of next year. So I guess they're the key dates to be aware of. We've had a couple more questions in, so I'm a little bit conscious of time, but we can take at least one more question and see how we're going. So I guess this is perhaps more of a comment. Sharing your preliminary guidelines may help potential sponsors to participate in the pilot. For that person, I'd encourage you to look at the project webpage, because there are a lot of deliverables already available, so you can get a really nice sense of the work that's already undertaken and the kind of activity in the project. So thank you for the comment. For the next one then, so pilot case proposal applications from a company will need to list the medical device as well as the clinical site. So I guess this is perhaps a slightly more practical question. Sometimes sponsors may identify a target country for their study, but may not have the hospital finalized yet. I could maybe turn to Fanny in case there's further information for this, but I think our criteria are that you're targeting an EU country within the MDR framework. So perhaps your site isn't completely finalized, but you're definitely going to run the study within the MDR framework. But Fanny, is there anything else to add for that one?
Yes, absolutely. You're correct. In the first phases of the expression of interest, and also the online application, you do not yet have to provide any details on the clinical site. There is a question around more general the type of disease area that the medical device is intending to address, but no technical information about the medical device will be asked at the first stages. So the best would be, and also looking at the next question on how to apply for a pilot, we have a web page where the process for applying and submitting the call for expression for a pilot is all laid out, that we invite you to read, and which will then also provide you the opportunity to get in touch with the point of contact of the HEU-EFS consortium. We are having a dedicated webinar in the next couple of weeks on the 5th of December, where we will be deep diving on all elements required for the different steps of the pilots. And if in the meantime you have any questions, again, you can get in touch with us at any moment through the address that we've also provided in the slide, which is pilot@heu-efs.eu. Just a reminder that this webinar is also recorded and will be made available online, and we will also be sharing all the slides that we've shared with you today, so you can always go back to anything that has been presented and discussed.
Thank you, Fanny. So the time is a little bit short here. I can see a couple of questions have come in. So I think that the next one there, how can you apply? That will hopefully be covered in the webinar materials that we'll share afterwards. So there is the point of contact, the specific email, and you can apply from today. As an SME, we will be concerned about sharing detail. As we mentioned earlier, we will be using non-disclosure agreements, so that should make it legally possible for sponsors or companies to confidentially share information. And perhaps just briefly on the final one, could we provide recommended clinical sites? Within the project, we have been doing a lot of engagement with the hospital sites who are partners in the consortium. So we may be able to provide some pointers. I guess it's something that we can discover as part of the pilot process. So with that, I might hand over to Judita and Andrea for some concluding remarks, and thank you from my side.
Thank you very much, Tom. Before we move to the next steps, let me further clarify that information regarding the pilot use cases will not circulate among the partners. So information regarding the technology will be kept confidential, and basically Bocconi will have access to some information, but no members of the private consortium, no other companies will have access to any information regarding the pilot use cases. Some important next steps. While you will all receive a message with relevant links on how to find where to find our slides shortly after the webinar, and you will also receive in the coming days the link to register for next webinar dedicated to the pilots on December the 5th. We would like to invite you to follow us through subscribing to our newsletter, and follow us on social media, especially LinkedIn. Here you can find 3 different QR codes that will guide you. The first to the call for expression of interest, which is already open and will be open until the end of March 2026. A number of project deliverables have already been approved by the European Commission, by IHI. So all the materials that have already been approved are available to you on our project website. A number of other deliverables, including the proposed framework and the templates, have been submitted and are currently under the evaluation by the European Commission. And last, don't forget to follow us, to check regularly our website, where you can find information regarding all our participation in conferences. And by the way, just in case some of you is planning to attend ISPOR in Glasgow next year, please consider that we have a panel session organized. My colleague Luisa Buzzelli from Bocconi will chair that session, and Tom Melvin from University of Galway, Marta Kerstan from Johnson & Johnson Medical, and one of the members of the patient advisory group, our friend Lucia Feito, will be the third speaker of that session, with participation of Andrea Rapagliosi from Edwards Life Science as well. I don't know if Andrea is still over the meeting. Yes, he is. So, Andrea,
Yes,
I leave you the floor for the last, for the goodbye.
I know that I'm talking to a well-established university teacher, but Glasgow is this year, not next year. It will be in a week time.
In a week time, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, no, because I said next year, so just to make sure that people get the right the right timing. No, I think that what we are demonstrating, my only call to the people that is disconnected, first of all, excellent, very interesting, details, structured. I think when I saw all the questions, very detailed, so the last one set of questions that Tom was managing, I would say to all the people in this call and close to this call, make the best use of the community of the consortium. Because as we say, Evels is in the details. When you enter in the phase of the pilots, there are lots of little aspects that needs to be calibrated rightly to be successful. And I think that one of the best things that already we can use as a result, that this group became really a community of experts. So the main sources, even before any formal early consultation or early dialogue. Often we say that innovation is like a marathon, not an 100-meter dash, because demand long-term persistence, focus, stamina, lots of these elements. I see all of that really, you guys, everyone is really delivering on that. And I think this collaboration should be really even more material with the phase of the pilots. So thanks a lot. Extremely interesting, useful session.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for everybody for attending this webinar. Stay in touch.